Caught my spoiled sister. Kissing my BF a week before. Her wedding. Told her fiancé, but he exposed her at the altar. I should have trusted my gut. I should have known something was wrong the second my sister started laughing at my boyfriend's stupid jokes, but I didn't. And that's how I ended up standing in my parents' backyard, watching them kiss like I didn't even exist. Something was off. I couldn't explain it, couldn't even put my finger on what exactly felt wrong, but there was a weight in my chest that wouldn't go away. A quiet alarm, buzzing just beneath the surface. And yet, everything in my life was fine. More than fine, actually. At 28, I had a stable job, a loving boyfriend, and a family that, while not perfect, had always been close. My younger sister, Jessica, was about to get married to Mark, a man who adored her. The entire family was buzzing with wedding excitement, and I was genuinely happy for her. There was no reason to feel uneasy, no logical reason at least. The first time I noticed it, whatever it was at a family dinner. We were all gathered at my parents' house, a typical Sunday night tradition. The long oak dining table was covered in plates of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and wine glasses that had been refilled more than once. Laughter echoed through the dining room, warm and familiar. Everything felt normal, almost too normal. Daniel, my boyfriend of 4 years, was telling some joke. I don't even remember what it was about, something dumb, something that wasn't funny. And yet, Jessica laughed. Loudly, a little too loudly. I turned to look at her, surprised. My sister had never found Daniel funny. She usually rolled her eyes at his jokes, giving me that knowing look that said, "You actually like this guy?" But now, she was beaming at him, her eyes sparkling with amusement. It was weird, but I brushed it off. She was happy, excited about the wedding. Maybe she was just in a good mood. Then came the small things, the things I should have ignored, but couldn't. After dinner, we all moved to the living room, lounging on the couch, sipping coffee, and chatting about wedding plans. That's when I started to notice it again. Jessica sat next to Daniel. Not just next to him, but close. Closer than she needed to be. She laughed a lot. Too much, at things that weren't even remotely funny. And every time Daniel spoke, she leaned in slightly, her fingers brushing his wrist as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was being ridiculous, but my stomach twisted, and I found myself watching them more than I was listening to the conversation. Then, as I stood up to grab a glass of water from the kitchen, I caught something I wasn't supposed to see. Jessica was watching Daniel, not in a casual way, not like a sister-in-law-to-be or even a friend. Her gaze lingered on him, quiet and unreadable, like she was studying him, like she was memorizing something only she could see. Then, as if she felt me looking, her eyes snapped to mine. For a split second, there was something there, something too much, something that made my skin prickle. But in an instant, it was gone. She looked away quickly, her expression smoothing back into effortless normalcy, like nothing had happened, like I'd imagined it. I swallowed hard, turning back toward the kitchen. Maybe I had imagined it, but the uneasy feeling in my gut told me otherwise. At first, I told myself I was being ridiculous, overthinking, reading too much into things, but the more I paid attention, the harder it became to ignore. It wasn't just that one night. Jessica's behavior didn't stop. If anything, it became more obvious. Every time we had a family gathering, she somehow always ended up next to Daniel. It didn't matter if we were at the dinner table, in the living room, or at a restaurant, she always found a way. Even when there were empty seats elsewhere, she'd casually slide into the one closest to him, acting as if it was the most natural thing in the world. At first, I thought I was the only one who noticed. But then, at one dinner, my mom, sweet, oblivious as ever, gave Jessica a lighthearted nudge and teased, "You sure are attached to Daniel these days. It's like you're trying to steal him from Amanda." I expected Jessica to laugh, maybe roll her eyes, maybe even make a joke about how she'd never go for a guy like him. Instead, she just smiled, a small, unreadable smile, and shrugged. What can I say? He's fun to be around. The comment should have meant nothing, but the way she said it, the way her fingers absent-mindedly tapped the stem of her wine glass while she spoke, sent an icy shiver down my spine. I started watching more closely. She was always the first to react when Daniel spoke, laughing at things that weren't remotely funny, nodding along like every word he said was profound. And if he needed help with something, grabbing drinks from the kitchen, carrying in groceries, adjusting the volume on the TV, she was always the first to jump up. Even when I was right there, closer than her. It wasn't normal. And then I saw it. It was at a family barbecue in my parents' backyard, a big pre-wedding gathering filled with laughter, music, and the smell of grilled steak. At some point in the evening, I went inside to grab my phone, which I'd left charging on the kitchen counter. I wasn't gone for more than 5 minutes, but when I stepped back outside, I froze. Daniel and Jessica were standing in the farthest corner of the yard, partially obscured by the dim lighting. Too close, way too close. Jessica was giggling at something, tilting her head back slightly, eyes locked on Daniel. Her hand rested lightly on his wrist, fingers brushing his skin. And he wasn't moving away. He wasn't pulling back. I felt my pulse quicken. For a second, I didn't move. I just watched. Then I took a step forward. My shoe scraped against the patio stones, and in an instant, Jessica snatched her hand back. Daniel turned, looking startled to see me there. Jessica, on the other hand, barely hesitated. She smiled, calm, effortless, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd like nothing had happened. My heart pounded against my ribs. I wanted to believe it was nothing, a trick of the light, a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew better. That night, I couldn't pretend anymore. As soon as we got home, I turned to Daniel, my arms crossed tightly over my chest. I need to ask you something. He raised an eyebrow, kicking off his shoes. What's up? I hesitated for only a second before blurting it out. Do you think Jessica is flirting with you? Daniel blinked. Then, to my absolute frustration, he laughed. What? Amanda, come on. He shook his head, amused. You're imagining things. She's just excited about the wedding. I clenched my jaw. Excited about the wedding? Daniel, she was touching you tonight. She laughs at everything you say. She always finds a way to sit next to you. And that look she gives you... I exhaled sharply. You really don't notice it? His amusement faded. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Amanda, you're overthinking this. I searched his face, waiting for something. Some kind of reassurance. Something like, I'll talk to her, or I'll make sure to keep my distance. But he didn't say any of that. He just wanted to move past it. And that didn't sit right with me. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind spiraling. Was I losing it? Seeing things that weren't there? Or was I ignoring something real, something right in front of me? Jessica's hand on his wrist, the way she watched him, the way she always positioned herself near him. My gut told me something was off. And for the first time, I decided I wasn't just going to let it go. I needed answers. After that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. Daniel's dismissive attitude only made it worse. If he had nothing to hide, why was he so quick to brush me off? And Jessica, every memory of her giggles, lingering touches, and the way she looked at him played on a loop in my head. I wasn't imagining things. I refused to let it go. So I made a decision. I had to confront Jessica. I took a deep breath and grabbed my phone, my fingers hesitating over the keyboard for just a moment before I typed out a message. Hey, want to grab a coffee? Just us? Seconds later, my phone buzzed. Sure, been a while since we had a sister date. Tomorrow morning? She had no idea what was coming. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early. It was a cozy little spot near Jessica's apartment, the kind we used to go to all the time before wedding planning took over her life. I sat by the window, drumming my fingers against the wooden table, my mind racing. What was I even expecting? A confession? An apology? Would she laugh it off again? Try to manipulate me into thinking I was crazy? The door chimed, and I looked up just as Jessica walked in. She was smiling, radiating her usual effortless charm as if nothing was wrong. Hey, sis, she chirped, sliding into the seat across from me. So what's this about? You finally here to help me pick out wedding cake flavors? I didn't waste time. Cut the crap, Jessica. Her smile faltered for a split second, so quick I almost missed it. But I didn't. I know what you're doing, I continued, my voice calm but firm. I see the way you act around Daniel. The way you look at him? The way you find excuses to be near him? You think I wouldn't notice? Jessica blinked, then let out a short laugh. Oh my God, Amanda, are you serious? You actually think I... She shook her head, amused. Wow, you're really reaching here. I clenched my jaw. Don't play dumb. I've seen you, Jessica. I saw the way you touched his arm at the barbecue. I saw the way you pulled back the second you noticed me watching. And it's not just that. It's every single time we're together. You're always right next to him. You laugh at everything he says, even when it's not funny. You look at him like... I stopped myself before I said something I couldn't take back. Jessica leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. Like what? She challenged, her voice sharp now. I exhaled slowly. Like he's yours. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The cafe hummed around us, coffee machines whirring, quiet chatter from other tables. But all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then, Jessica rolled her eyes. Jesus, Amanda, do you hear yourself? You sound insane. Daniel is practically family. I've known him for years. Excuse me for being comfortable around him. I shook my head. This isn't just you being friendly. This is different. You're different, she scoffed. Oh, so now I'm not allowed to joke with him. Not allowed to sit near him. God, maybe I should stop breathing around him too, just in case it makes you uncomfortable. Her sarcasm lit a fuse in me. I just want you to be honest with me, Jessica. If you respect me at all, you'll tell me the truth. For the first time, her smile completely dropped. Her eyes darkened, lips pressing into a thin line. You really think I would do that to you? She asked quietly. You think I would actually try to steal your boyfriend? I searched her face, looking for something, remorse, guilt, anything. But all I saw was a carefully built wall. When I didn't answer fast enough, she leaned forward, her voice dropping lower. You know what I think, Amanda? I think you're insecure. I think you don't trust Daniel, and instead of admitting that, you're taking it out on me. My stomach twisted. That's not... No, listen to yourself. She let out a breathy laugh, shaking her head. You're picking apart every little thing I do, turning it into something it's not. Maybe you should be asking yourself why you don't trust your own boyfriend. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles ached. She was trying to flip this on me, make me feel crazy. Maybe that would have worked before. Maybe a few weeks ago I would have doubted myself, convinced myself I was imagining things. But I wasn't imagining that look in her eyes. I wasn't imagining the way she had pulled her hand away at the barbecue the second I appeared. And I wasn't imagining the way she was way too calm right now, like she knew she had the upper hand. I inhaled sharply and stood up. Jessica just sat there, watching me, her expression unreadable. I hope for your sake that you're telling the truth, I said, my voice quiet but firm. She tilted her head, the corner of her mouth twitching up slightly. And if I'm not? I swallowed hard, my jaw tightening. Then you'll regret it. Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked out of the cafe, my mind spinning. I had gone in hoping for answers, for some kind of clarity. Instead, I left with something else entirely. Something cold and undeniable settling in my chest. Jessica was hiding something, and I wasn't going to stop until I found out what it was. After my conversation with Jessica, things changed, but not in the way I expected. She stopped being so obvious around Daniel. No more lingering touches, no more loud, exaggerated laughter at his dumb jokes, no more sneaky little glances when she thought I wasn't looking. If I hadn't known better, I might have believed she'd backed off, but I did know better. And something about the sudden shift made my skin crawl. Daniel had changed too. He was quieter when Jessica was around, like he was too aware of me watching. He avoided my eyes whenever she spoke, and there was a stiffness in his body, like he was forcing himself to act normal. It was worse than before. Before, at least, they were careless, obvious, even. Now, it felt like I was the only one who knew something was still wrong, and that meant they were hiding it. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for the truth to come to me. A week before the wedding, I drove to my parents' house. I needed to talk to them, to tell them what I had been suspecting for weeks. Maybe I was looking for validation. Maybe I just wanted someone to tell me I wasn't crazy. When I pulled up, I noticed something strange. The front door was slightly ajar. I hesitated, then pushed it open. "Mom? Dad?" I called out, stepping inside. Silence. I frowned. Their cars weren't in the driveway, so they must not have been home. But if that was the case, why was the door open? Then I heard it. A soft murmur of voices drifting in from the backyard. I followed the sound, my pulse picking up. As I reached the sliding glass door leading to the garden, I recognized the voices instantly. Jessica and Daniel. My stomach clenched. I should have turned around. I should have walked away, pretended I didn't hear them, didn't suspect anything, didn't already know. But I couldn't. My feet carried me forward, past the patio, toward the tall bushes at the edge of the yard. Their voices were clearer now. Jessica's giggle, Daniel's low murmur. Then I stepped around the corner and my world shattered. Daniel was standing against the brick wall, Jessica's arms draped around his neck. His hands were on her waist, fingers pressing into the fabric of her dress. Their bodies were flushed together, and they were kissing. Not a hesitant, unsure kiss, not a drunken mistake. A deep, hungry, desperate kiss. Jessica's legs wrapped around his waist, pulling him closer, her fingers tangled in his hair. His hands roamed under her dress, gripping, touching, like he had done this before. Like this wasn't new. Like this wasn't a mistake. The world around me blurred, my ears buzzed, my vision tunneled. My chest felt like it was caving in, like something inside me had snapped. And then, before I could even stop myself, before I could think, what the hell is this? The words ripped out of me before I could stop them, sharp and raw, slicing through the quiet evening air. Jessica and Daniel tore apart like they had been electrocuted. Jessica stumbled back against the wall, her chest rising and falling in quick, shallow breaths. Daniel's hands dropped from her waist, like he had just realized where they had been. For a moment, nobody spoke. The only sound was the distant hum of crickets, the rustling of leaves in the evening breeze. Then, slowly they turned to face me. Daniel's face went ghostly white. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Jessica wiped at her lips with the back of her hand, as if that would somehow erase what I had just seen. I took a step forward, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. My entire body was trembling, my pulse roaring in my ears. "Say something!" My voice was barely above a whisper, but it was lethal. Daniel swallowed hard. "Amanda, no." I cut him off. "You don't get to talk first." Jessica let out a shaky breath, tears pooling in her eyes. "Amanda, Shut up." I didn't want to hear it. Not from her. Not from either of them. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. It's not what you think." I let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Oh? So you weren't just kissing my sister? You weren't just—" I gestured between them, my voice breaking. "What the hell was that? Daniel?" Jessica took a step forward, her voice trembling. "It was a mistake." "A mistake?" My voice rose, shaking with fury. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is spilling coffee on someone. I pointed at them, my whole body vibrating with rage. "This is a fucking choice." Daniel squeezed his eyes shut like he was trying to think, trying to find some excuse that could magically undo what I had just seen. But there was nothing. Jessica wiped at her cheeks, her mascara smudging. "Amanda, please." "Please. What?" My throat burned. "Please understand. Please forgive you. Is that what you want?" I shook my head, my breath coming fast and uneven. "You've been lying to me for weeks, Jessica. You sat across from me at dinner, you looked me in the eyes, and you fucking lied." She sobbed, but I didn't care. Daniel finally spoke again, his voice desperate. "Amanda, I swear, this isn't what it looks like." "Oh, really?" I took a step closer, my vision blurred with tears. "Because it looks like my boyfriend and my sister have been sneaking around behind my back. So tell me, Daniel, what exactly is this supposed to look like?" Silence. Neither of them had an answer. Jessica was full-on crying now, her shoulders shaking. "I didn't mean for this to happen. Bullshit." My voice was ice. "You knew what you were doing. You chose this." Jessica hiccuped through her sobs. "It's not like that." "Then what is it like?" I snapped, my voice cracking. Tell me, Jess. Explain to me how this... I gestured between them wildly, my breath ragged. Isn't exactly what the fuck it looks like? Neither of them spoke. Because they couldn't. Because they knew. I let out a hollow laugh, stepping back. The world felt like it was tilting beneath me, like I had lost my footing and was free-falling into some cruel, twisted nightmare. You know what? My voice was eerily calm now. You two deserve each other. Jessica let out a choked sob. No, Amanda, please. I said shut up. I flinched at the force of my own voice, but I didn't care. Daniel reached for me. Amanda! I recoiled like he was poison. Don't you fucking touch me! His hand dropped to his side. His face twisted with something, regret, maybe, or shame. But it didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. I turned on my heel and walked away. I don't remember getting to my car. I don't remember starting the engine, but I remember ignoring the way my phone lit up with call after call. Daniel, Jessica, even my mom. I ignored every single one. I drove. And drove. And drove. And when I finally pulled over, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles went white, I realized something. I wasn't just heartbroken. I wasn't just betrayed. I was done. With both of them. I drove for hours, the city lights blurring past as I gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands. I had no real destination, just an overwhelming need to get away. Going back to the apartment was out of the question. Everything there was contaminated. Every room, every memory, every piece of furniture now felt like a cruel reminder of the people who had betrayed me. I couldn't stomach the thought of sleeping in the same bed where Daniel once held me, where I once believed I was safe. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I pulled into a rundown motel on the outskirts of the next city. The check-in process was a blur. I barely acknowledged the bored receptionist, barely noticed the peeling wallpaper as I stumbled into the tiny, dimly lit room. The door clicked shut behind me, and suddenly, I was alone. No voices, no apologies, no lies, just me and the unbearable weight of what had happened. For the first time since I walked into that backyard, I let go. Silent, shuddering sobs racked my body as I curled up on the stiff motel bed, my chest aching with something beyond heartbreak. It wasn't just the loss of a relationship. It was the loss of trust, of family, of everything I thought I knew. Jessica, my sister, had done this to me. And Daniel, the man I had planned a future with, the man who was supposed to love me, had thrown it all away for her. The worst part? They didn't even have the decency to be sorry. My phone vibrated against the nightstand, snapping me out of my spiral. I sat up, wiping my face as I glanced at the screen. Mom. A second later, another call. Daniel. Then Jessica. Then Daniel again. I clenched my jaw and blocked both their numbers. Then Dad's number popped up. My heart twisted. Mom was using his phone now. I let it ring. The texts started immediately after. Mom. Amanda, please, we're worried. Where are you? Jessica. Please talk to me. I swear it wasn't what you think. Daniel. I need to explain. Please pick up. I scoffed, throwing my phone onto the bed. Explain? Explain what? That I didn't actually see what I saw? That somehow, them wrapped around each other, kissing like their lives depended on it, wasn't what it looked like? A bitter laugh escaped me. I wasn't falling for it. Not anymore. I spent the next few hours in a numb haze, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. How do you move forward when the people closest to you rip your life apart? Was I supposed to just pretend like everything was fine? Like I wasn't completely and utterly shattered? Then, suddenly, the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Mark, Jessica's fiancé. My heart pounded as I grabbed my phone. Mark deserved to know. He needed to know. No matter how much it hurt, no matter how much chaos it would cause, I couldn't let him marry her without knowing the truth. With shaking hands, I found his number and pressed call. The phone rang twice before he picked up. Amanda? His voice was laced with concern. Where the hell are you? Your family's freaking out. Jessica said you just disappeared. I inhaled sharply, gripping the phone tighter. Mark, listen to me. My voice wavered, but I forced myself to push forward. I need to tell you something, and it's going to hurt, but you deserve to hear it from me before anyone else. Silence. A tense, heavy silence. Then, quietly, "What is it?" I closed my eyes, forcing the words out. "Jessica has been cheating on you." A beat of dead air. Then, a sharp, clipped response. "Explain." So I did. I told him everything, from the first uneasy feeling to the way Jessica would always find a way to be close to Daniel. I told him about the backyard, about the way I caught them together, tangled in each other like I didn't even exist. When I finished, the silence on the other end was suffocating. For a long time, Mark didn't say anything. Then, finally, his voice came through the speaker, cold, controlled, but simmering with something dark underneath. "Thank you for telling me." That was all he said before the line went dead. I woke up in my hotel room to the faint hum of traffic outside. My head felt heavy, like I hadn't truly rested in days. Maybe I hadn't. My eyes flicked toward the bedside clock. Kalai 10 மணி 12 நிமிடம். Today was Jessica's wedding day. Or at least it was supposed to be. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, a hollow ache settling deep in my chest. I had no intention of going. Why should I? Why should I sit there, surrounded by smiling faces, pretending everything was perfect when I knew the truth? When I had seen the truth with my own eyes? But then there was Mark, the one person who had as much reason to walk away from this as I did. Had he canceled the wedding? Had he decided to forgive her? The thought made me sick. Could he really stand up there, slip a ring onto her finger knowing what she had done? Knowing who she had done it with? I reached for my phone, about to text one of my cousins to ask about the situation when my screen lit up with an incoming call. Emma. I frowned and answered immediately. "Hey, Emma. Oh my God, Amanda." She practically shrieked into the phone. "You are not going to believe what just happened." I sat up straight, my heart pounding. "What? Did he call it off?" There was rustling on the other end, and when she spoke again, her voice was breathless, like she had run to a quieter spot. "Not exactly," she said, her tone laced with excitement. "Just listen." And so, I did. The ceremony had started just like any other wedding. The church was packed with friends, family, and people who had come to witness what was supposed to be the happiest day of Jessica's life. She had walked down the aisle, glowing in white, her veil trailing behind her like something out of a dream. My parents were beaming, guests smiling, whispers of admiration rippling through the crowd. Mark stood at the altar, waiting. Calm. Too calm. Emma said she should have known something was off by the way he held himself. Too rigid, too controlled, like a man standing on the edge of a decision that would change everything. The vows began. The officiant turned to Mark first, asking him to recite his. That's when he raised a hand, signaling that he had something to say. At first, everyone thought he was just going to say something sweet, maybe a personal message for Jessica before the official vows. But then, in a steady, cutting voice, he spoke. "Before I say my vows, I have an important announcement to make." Jessica, standing beside him, blinked in confusion. My parents exchanged glances. The crowd hushed, waiting. Then, his voice dropped into something sharp and cold. "I cannot marry someone who has betrayed me." And her own sister. A gasp rippled through the crowd. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Jessica froze, her face draining of color. The church fell into stunned silence, the weight of his words sinking in like an anchor dragging them all under. Emma swore she could hear Jessica's shaky breath from where she sat. She opened her mouth, like she wanted to deny it, but Mark wasn't finished. His jaw was tight, his voice unwavering. "I know the truth, Jessica. Your sister saw it first, and now, so have I." Jessica staggered back a step, her veil slipping from her shoulders. "Mark, no. No." He let out a bitter laugh. "So you didn't sneak around behind my back? You didn't cheat on me with Daniel?" Murmurs spread like wildfire. Guests whispered to each other, their eyes darting between Jessica and Mark. My father looked as if he had been punched in the gut. Jessica shook her head violently, her eyes filling with tears. "I love you," she choked out. "Please, Mark, you have to believe me." Mark's expression didn't waver. He simply reached into his pocket, pulled out his wedding band, and let it fall to the floor with a quiet clink. "You love me?" His voice was quiet now, almost pitying. Or do you love your sister's boyfriend? Jessica collapsed into sobs. Emma's voice was practically shaking with excitement as she recounted everything. Amanda, you should have seen it. People were mortified. My mom was crying. Your dad looked like he was about to faint. And your mom... Oh my God. Your mom was just frozen. She paused. And Mark? He just walked out, just turned around and left like it was nothing. I let out a shaky breath. And Jessica? Emma made a sound between a scoff and a laugh. She just stood there, crying. She tried to run after him, but by then, people had already started leaving. Some were straight up whispering about her as they walked out. I even saw Aunt Linda shake her head in disappointment before storming off. I pressed a hand to my forehead, trying to process everything. So the wedding's over? Emma snorted. Oh, it's beyond over. It's the biggest disaster our family's ever seen. I sat there, gripping the phone, my heart pounding. I had spent weeks drowning in betrayal, feeling powerless, feeling like I was the only one carrying the weight of this truth. But now? Now the whole world knew what Jessica had done, and I didn't even have to lift a finger. A slow, almost disbelieving smile crept onto my lips. Jessica was ruined, and it wasn't even my doing. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. The aftermath of the wedding disaster rippled through every corner of my life. I knew it would happen. I had braced myself for it. And yet, when the messages started rolling in, the reality of it all settled like a weight in my chest. Emma texted me first. You won't believe it. Everyone's talking about it. Jessica looked like a ghost when Mom dragged her out after Mark left. Another message came seconds later. She didn't even fight it, Amanda. She just let it happen, like she wasn't even there anymore. I read her words but didn't respond. Instead, I sat on the edge of my hotel bed, staring out the window at the city below, my fingers curling around my phone. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt some deep, satisfying sense of justice after what Jessica had done to me. But all I felt was empty. The phone call came later that evening. I saw my mother's name flashing on the screen and, for a brief moment, considered letting it go to voicemail. But I knew her. She wouldn't stop until I answered. So I did. The second I picked up, her voice exploded through the speaker, raw with anger. How could you do this to your sister? I clenched my jaw, gripping the phone tighter. Mom, right on her wedding day? In front of everyone? Do you have any idea what you've done? Her voice cracked, furious and full of disappointment. You humiliated her. You humiliated this family. A bitter laugh escaped me. I humiliated her, I repeated, my voice low, incredulous. Jessica cheated on her fiancé with my boyfriend, and I'm the one who humiliated her? She's your sister, my mother shot back. You don't destroy family like that. Funny, I said coldly, because she didn't seem to have a problem destroying mine. Silence. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven, like she was holding back tears. Jessica is falling apart, Amanda, she finally said. She won't eat. She won't talk to anyone. She's completely shattered. Is that what you wanted? Are you happy now? I swallowed, something bitter and sharp rising in my throat. And what about me? Mom? My voice was eerily calm, but my fingers ached from how tightly I was holding the phone. Did you care when I was the one falling apart? When I found out the man I loved was screwing my sister behind my back? Did you care how I felt? A pause. A long, suffocating pause. Then, without another word, she hung up. Jessica had disappeared from the world. According to Emma, she hadn't left the house since the wedding. Her phone was off. She wasn't going to work. Every attempt to reach her was met with silence. Not that many people were trying. Mark's family had told everyone why the wedding was called off. The whispers spread quickly, turning into a full-blown storm. Friends distanced themselves. Colleagues gossiped behind her back. People who once adored her now saw her for what she was, a liar, a cheat, a disgrace. And our parents? They took the only stance they knew how. Jessica is the victim. Amanda ruined everything. I should have cared. A few weeks ago, I would have cared. I would have spent nights crying, wondering why I was always the one blamed, why I was always the one expected to forgive. But now, I had nothing left to give. I was done. A week passed before I returned to my apartment to pack my things. I hadn't been back since everything fell apart. Walking inside felt like stepping into a crime scene, like the walls still held echoes of conversations that now meant nothing. The couch where Daniel and I used to sit, the kitchen where we made breakfast together, the bed where I had once felt safe. All of it was poisoned now. I was halfway through stuffing my clothes into a suitcase when a soft knock sounded at the door. I already knew who it was before I even opened it. Jessica stood there looking wrecked. Her hair was tangled, her face bare of makeup, her eyes swollen and red. She had lost weight. Her dress hung loosely off her frame. For the first time in her life, she didn't look perfect. She looked broken. I didn't say anything, just stared. She swallowed hard, her voice hoarse when she finally spoke. You destroyed me. A slow exhale left my lips. I had expected an apology, a plea for forgiveness, even a pathetic excuse. But this? She was still trying to make me the villain? I shook my head, the last remnants of pity evaporating. No, Jessica, I said quietly. You destroyed yourself. Her bottom lip trembled, tears spilling onto her cheeks. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I let out a humorless laugh. You didn't mean to sneak around with my boyfriend for months? You didn't mean to lie to my face over and over? You didn't mean to betray me? My voice hardened. Bullshit. Jessica let out a sob, her knees buckling as she crumpled to the floor. I miss you, she whispered. I miss us. Please, Amanda. Say something. Say you still love me. I stared at her. This person I had once trusted more than anyone, this person who had been my sister, my family, my blood. I had spent my whole life protecting her, defending her, loving her. And she had thrown it all away for what? A few stolen moments with a man who didn't even love her? I took a step back, my grip tightening around the suitcase handle. I did love you, I said softly. But you made sure that version of me doesn't exist anymore. Jessica let out a choked gasp, but I didn't wait for her response. I turned around, walked out the door, and didn't look back. She had lost everything, and for the first time, that wasn't my problem anymore. Months passed. The chaos had faded, the dust had settled, and for the first time in a long while, my life felt like it truly belonged to me again. I had left everything behind. My old apartment, my toxic family, the memories that once kept me awake at night. Moving to a new city had been terrifying at first, but it turned out to be exactly what I needed. A fresh start, a clean slate. Then, one evening, as I sat in my tiny but cozy apartment, my phone buzzed with a message from an unexpected name. Mark. Hey, I'm in town for work. Want to grab a coffee? I stared at the screen, hesitating for only a moment before typing back. Me. Sure. Tomorrow at noon? The cafe was quiet when I walked in, the soft hum of conversation blending with the aroma of fresh coffee. I spotted Mark immediately. He looked good, healthier, more at ease. But there was still something in his eyes, a lingering weight from everything that had happened. When he saw me, he smiled, standing to pull out a chair for me. Amanda, he said warmly, it's good to see you. I sat down, returning the smile. You too. For a while, we just talked. About work, about life, about how strange it felt to be rebuilding from the wreckage of what we once thought was love. And then, after a sip of his coffee, Mark finally asked the question I had been expecting. Has Jessica tried to contact you? I shook my head. Number. And I don't care if she does. He exhaled, nodding in understanding. Good, he said simply, because she's officially out of my life for good. Mark told me everything. How, after the wedding disaster, he had taken legal action against Jessica. He had spent thousands on that wedding. Venue deposits, catering, invitations, travel arrangements, all for a marriage that never happened because of her choices. So, he sued. And he won. Jessica had been forced to pay back every cent. It was a crushing amount, more than she could handle. She had no choice but to sell her apartment, draining every bit of her savings just to avoid further legal trouble. She had lost everything. Her relationship, her finances, her reputation. Even my parents, who had once defended her so fiercely, had started to pull away. They had nothing left to give her. For the first time, Jessica had to face the consequences of her actions completely alone. Mark leaned back in his chair, watching my reaction carefully. "Are you happy about it?" he asked. I thought about it for a moment. The truth was, I didn't feel triumphant. There was no satisfaction in knowing she had hit rock bottom, but there was peace in knowing she couldn't hurt me anymore. "I'm not happy," I admitted, "but I'm relieved." Mark nodded slowly, as if he understood exactly what I meant. As our conversation drifted into more comfortable territory, I could feel the weight of our shared history lingering between us. There was something in the way he looked at me, something hesitant yet hopeful. And then, as we finished the last of our coffee, he finally said it. "I know this might be a stupid question," he began, running a hand through his hair. "But do you think we could try again? You and me?" I inhaled sharply, caught off guard by the directness of it. Mark was a good man. He had been betrayed just as deeply as I had. And yet, as I sat there looking at him, I knew my answer immediately. I smiled but shook my head. "I think I've learned something important through all of this," I said gently. "Sometimes the only way to be truly happy is to move on." Mark studied me for a long moment before finally nodding, a small, understanding smile on his lips. "Yeah," he said softly. "I think you're right." There was no bitterness between us, no regrets, just two people who had survived the same storm, finally finding their own paths. When I stepped outside, the sun was warm against my skin, the city bustling with life around me. I felt lighter than I had in months, like a weight had finally been lifted. Jessica had lost everything. Daniel had faded into nothingness. Mark had found his own closure. And me, I was finally free. I took a deep breath, letting the fresh air fill my lungs, and whispered to myself with a small smile, "I should have trusted my gut from the start." Then, without looking back, I walked forward, into the rest of my life.